I'm 28 now, but this happened when I was 23. Back then, I was working long hours as a junior architect in Seattle and barely had time for myself. I loved the outdoors, though. It was how I recharged when life got too loud. Every few months, I'd grab my tent, a sleeping bag, and head into the mountains for a weekend alone. It wasn't reckless, at least not in my mind. I'd grown up camping with my dad and knew how to handle myself in the woods. I always told someone where I was going, brought bear spray, and camped in legal areas. This trip was in late September, when the air starts to bite a little at night, but the leaves haven't all fallen yet. I drove out early Friday to a spot near Clay Elum Lake. The idea was to disconnect completely. No phone, no emails, no people. By the time I parked near the trailhead, the morning fog was still lifting off the trees. It smelled like pine and damp earth, and the only sounds were the crunch of gravel under my boots and the hum of the river nearby. It felt like peace. At least for the first day, it did. I hiked for about 3 hours before finding a small clearing beside the water. It was perfect. Flat ground, good distance from the trail, and a ring of tall firs that made it feel private. I pitched my tent, gathered some firewood, and spent the afternoon reading and sketching. That first night, I cooked ramen on my portable stove, watched the sky fade to black, and listened to the crackling of the fire. There's a kind of silence in the woods that's both calming and heavy, like you're aware of how far you are from everything else. The next morning, I went fishing. The sun cut through the mist and the lake looked like glass. A couple of hikers passed by on the trail. We exchanged polite nods, nothing unusual. Later that day, I found footprints leading down toward the water near my camp, not mine. They were older though, probably from another camper days earlier. When evening came, I lit my fire again and made coffee. It was one of those moments you almost wish you could photograph, just to remind yourself that peace still exists. I remember thinking how lucky I was to be alone, how rare that kind of quiet is. That night I woke up around 2 a.m. to the sound of footsteps outside my tent. Slow, heavy, deliberate. At first I thought it might be an animal, maybe a deer, maybe a bear, but the steps stopped right next to my tent, too close, too steady. I held my breath. Then I heard something metallic, like the sound of a boot scraping against a can or a pot. I whispered, "Hey!" Trying to sound firm, the noise stopped. For a full minute, there was nothing but the thudding in my chest. Then the steps began again, moving away this time into the forest. I unzipped the tent just a little and peeked out. My fire was mostly embers now, barely lighting the clearing. I saw nothing but shadows. I told myself it had to be a wandering hiker. Maybe someone lost, maybe curious. But who hikes at 2 in the morning with no flashlight? I stayed awake until dawn, my knife clutched in my hand. The next day, I debated packing up early. But leaving meant admitting I was scared, and I hated that. I decided to stay one more night, reasoning that whoever had been there was probably gone by now. I spent the day closer to camp, carving small sticks for firewood and trying to relax. Still, I kept catching myself glancing toward the tree line, expecting movement. Around sunset, I noticed something strange, a small fire flickering through the trees, maybe 100 yards away. Someone else was camping nearby. I hadn't seen or heard anyone arrive. Maybe they hiked in from the other side, I told myself. I waved toward the light once, just to be polite, but got no response. The flames burned low, orange against the darkening woods. When night came, I crawled into my tent early, hoping to sleep through whatever unease had crept in. But at some point after midnight I woke again, this time to the faint sound of whistling, a slow, off-key tune, coming from the direction of that second fire. It wasn't a happy melody, more like someone trying to keep themselves calm. It would start and stop, then drift away. I lay frozen, listening. Then the whistling got louder. It was coming closer. I sat up, heart hammering, and reached for my flashlight. When I clicked it on, I aimed it toward the edge of the clearing. A man stood there, tall, thin, wearing a dark coat that hung to his knees. His face was half lit by my beam, unshaven, blank, eyes glinting like wet stones. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stared. "What do you want?" I called out, my voice cracking. He tilted his head slightly as if listening to something behind me. "You lost?" I tried again. Nothing. Then, after what felt like forever, he said quietly, "Your fire went out." I didn't answer. I couldn't. The way he said it, flat, emotionless, sent ice through my veins. He stepped forward just once. I backed up inside the tent, grabbed my knife and yelled, "Leave now or I'll call the cops." That made him stop. His eyes flicked toward my tent, then toward the lake, and finally back to me. Then he smiled. "See you by the water," he whispered and turned into the trees. I didn't sleep that night. I packed everything before sunrise, keeping my knife in hand and watching the tree line. I didn't see him again, but I heard splashing near the lake once as I loaded my bag. Too close, too deliberate. When I finally reached my car, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely fit the key into the ignition. The drive back felt endless. I stopped at a ranger station and told them what happened. They sent someone out later that day, but all they found were the remains of a small fire a short distance from my site and boot prints leading toward the lake. They said it was probably another camper trying to mess with me, that it happens sometimes. But the way the ranger said it, it felt rehearsed, like he didn't want to scare me more. For weeks after, I had nightmares of that man's face, the way he stood there silently, the sound of that broken whistle. I didn't camp again for almost 2 years. When I finally did, it was only with friends, and I never slept well. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still hear that tune. It's been 5 years now. I live in an apartment downtown, nowhere near the woods, but I still think about that night, about what he said before leaving. "See you by the water." A few months ago, out of curiosity, I looked up Clay Ilum Lake on Google Maps. There was a new campground built near the southern edge. In one of the photos posted by a random user, there was a man in the background standing near the shore. Tall, thin, wearing a long dark coat. He was staring directly at the camera. And I swear, even through the grainy image, I could almost see the smile.